What if I told you a donkey talks in the Bible? Well, it does happen in the book of Numbers. I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and today we're going to be looking at Bible Project's commentary overview on the book of Numbers, and I'm going to be providing commentary live as we go, so let's go ahead and get started.
The Book of Numbers. This fourth book of the Bible carries forward the story of Israel after their exodus from slavery in Egypt. God had brought them to Mount Sinai, and he entered into a covenant with them there. And despite Israel's rebellion, God had graciously provided a way for Israel to live near his holy presence in the tabernacle. So the book of Numbers begins as Israel wraps up their 1-year stay at Mount Sinai, and they head out into the wilderness on their way to the land that God promised Abraham.
Yeah, and they're going to spend a long time, and they already have been out there for a while.
Now, the book's storyline is designed according to the stages of their journey. So the first section begins at Mount Sinai, but then they set out and travel to the wilderness of Paran. And then from there, they travel to the plains of Moab, which is right across from the Promised Land. Now, the first part opens with a census where the people are numbered. That's where the book gets its name. And then there are laws about how the tribes of Israel were to be arranged in their camp. So the tabernacle was to be at the center, and then around that, the priests and the Levites, and then around them, the 12 tribes neatly arranged with Judah at their...
So this is Numbers is kind of an organizational document for the people of Israel at the time. A lot of people get lost in Leviticus and Numbers and Deuteronomy when they're doing Bible reading, but it's important to understand this stuff because it's important because it provides context for everything in Christianity.
Now, this was all an elaborate symbol about how God's holy presence was at the center of their existence as a people. This is all followed by a whole series of laws that develop the purity laws from the book of Leviticus. If God's presence was going to be in their midst, every effort should be made to make the camp pure, a place that welcomes God's holiness. In chapter 10, the cloud of God's presence lifts from the tabernacle and guides Israel away from Sinai out into the wilderness, and immediately things go terribly wrong. So in chapter 11, the people start complaining about their hunger and thirst and how they want to go back to Egypt. And then in chapter 12, Moses' own brother and sister begin opposing and bad-mouthing him in front of all of the people. This trip is not off to a good start. The next section begins as the Israelites arrive in the desert of Paran, about halfway to the Promised Land. And God tells Moses to send out the 12 spies, one for each tribe, so they can scout out the Promised Land. So when the spies all return, 10 of them say that there is no chance Israel can survive there because the Canaanites will destroy them. But there are 2 spies, Caleb and Joshua, who say that God can save them. But the 10 whip up the people into a fearful rage, and they start planning a mutiny. They're going to appoint a new leader and head back to Egypt.
Yeah, this is a really good Numbers, and this kind of part of the Torah is a really good case study on leadership and the fickleness of people and mob mentality. So you can learn a lot about leadership by just reading about Moses during this time. Is that people can be very fickle. They have short memories. A crowd, when it gets into a panic, or a lot of people when they get into a panic, mob mentality, those are real things.
So God is understandably angry, and Moses intercedes on the people's behalf. He calls God to be faithful to his promises to Abraham. And so God does, but not at the expense of his justice. He gives these Israelites
God's not going to give up justice.
To not enter the land. And God sentences this generation to wander in the wilderness for 40 years until they die. Only their children will get to enter the Promised Land. Now, you'd think this severe consequence would wake them up, but it gets even worse. So in the next story, there's a whole group of Levites that begin a rebellion, and they challenge Moses and Aaron's leadership, saying that they have gone way too far.
Yeah, if you are in leadership and you're never challenged and you've never run into a crisis like this, you're probably not leading good enough. Because if you lead to a place where everybody always likes, you're probably not leading at all. Leadership comes with emotional challenges, with relational challenges. It comes with challenges to your own thinking, to your wisdom. There's always going to be challenges to the way you're thinking as a leader. You have to find a way within yourself, though, to have good counsel from other leaders to make sure you're making the right decision, and also to be confident in what you feel called to do.
So God deals severely with these Levites, and he
Yeah.
renews his commitment to Moses and Aaron as Israel's leaders. Now, as they leave the region of Paran and hit the road, it goes downhill yet again. The Israelites start complaining again about their thirst, and they ask why Moses even brought them out of Egypt in the first place. So God tells Moses to speak
They haven't
to
talked
a
about the
rock
donkey
to bring
yet.
out
I don't know
water
if they're
for
going to
all
talk
of
about
the
the
people.
talking donkey.
But Moses doesn't really do this. He oversteps his bounds. He hits the rock twice and then says, "You rebels, do we have to bring water out of this rock?" So Moses dishonors God by putting himself in God's place as the one who brings out the water. And so Moses brings down on himself the same fate as the wilderness generation. He too will die in the desert and never get to enter the promised land.
Yeah.
After this, the Israelites rebel yet again, and God brings a very strange judgment on them, venomous snakes to come and bite the people. And so Moses again intercedes on behalf of the people. And God tells Moses to do this, to make a bronze snake and to lift it up on a
lift it.
pole, so that whoever looks at this snake would be healed of the poisonous snake bite.
And the reason that this context is important is Jesus mentions this story from Numbers 21, right? He says, just as Moses lifted up a snake in the wilderness, right? Like Jesus refers to these stories. So if you're not familiar with them, then you're not going to get the fullness of what Jesus is trying to say and do. That's why this stuff is so important.
It's a very strange symbol, but it speaks to the challenge that God has by being faithful to his covenant.
Right.
He's right to bring justice on the Israelites' evil and sin, but even God's justice gets transformed into a source of life for those who will look to God for healing. From here, the people head into the plains of Moab, and the first main part of the section focuses on the strange figure of Balaam.
Yes, there we
so
go,
the king of
Balaam.
Moab is freaked out at the
pretty sure it's
huge
Balaam.
group
Yep.
of people traveling
we
through
go.
its territory. So he hires a pagan sorcerer, Balaam, to pronounce curses on Israel. And 3 different times, Balaam finds that he cannot curse them. He can utter only blessing upon Israel. Remember God's promise to Abraham from Genesis 12. So not only can Balaam not curse Israel, but God
wait.
actually gives
Look, it's the donkey right here. I'm pretty sure it's Balaam's donkey. I could be wrong about this.
him a vision about a future Israelite
Right.
king who will one day bring God's justice to all of the nations. This vision recalls Jacob's promise to Judah in Genesis chapter 49. Now, it's worth stopping to reflect on the flow of the book so far. The rebellion stories in the wilderness, they just heap up on one another, getting worse and worse. And while God does bring partial acts of judgment on Israel, he's also kept showing mercy, providing food and water along the way. And so the Balaam story, it shows God's grace in bright colors. Because
Right.
here's Israel. They're down in the camp, grumbling and rebelling. But up in the hills, unbeknownst to them, God is protecting and even blessing them. And it's this contrast between Israel's rebellion and God's faithfulness in the wilderness. That's what made these stories so important for later generations of Israel. So the wilderness stories are retold time and again by later biblical prophets and poets, and even by the apostles in the New Testament. And these stories
Again, you can see the theme that's developing, right? Not developing, it's well on its way. Israel's rebellion versus God's faithfulness. This is a back and forth, push and pull, push and pull. This is the story of the Old Testament, push and pull, push and pull. Israel's rebellion and God's faithfulness until God decides to finally put an end to this push and pull through the person of Jesus Christ by taking upon flesh and living amongst us
always
and
serve as
dying
a
and rising
warning
for us.
that while God will remain faithful to his covenant
Right.
promises, he will also allow his people to walk away in rebellion and face the consequences.
Yeah, you can walk away in rebellion and face the consequences, which is why Arminianism is better than Calvinism in terms of a theological framework, right? You can resist God's grace. You can see that in the Old Testament. It's very apparent. You can resist God's grace. And so that's what's happening here.
After this, the rest of the book focuses on the children of the wilderness generation, and they begin preparing to inherit the promised land. They take another census of the new generation, then they go on and win a number of battles with the people groups around them, and then a few tribes even begin to settle in the promised land. So the book ends with the new generation poised to enter into the land, and Moses is about to deliver his final words of
Yep.
wisdom and warning. But for now, that's what the book of Numbers is all about.
Yeah, really, really good stuff. So you're seeing the push and pull, and you're noticing too that the movement of the Israelites into the promised land is not like a sudden thing that just happens, right? It's like a gradual thing. And the scripture tells us it's kind of this gradual transition into the promised land that obviously culminates in the book of Joshua here in just a couple books later. But I'm really enjoying this Bible commentary series. I hope that you all keep engaging with it because it's really important that we understand the scriptures. Even if you've read this stuff before, let's keep engaging it. Let's keep watching this. Let's keep talking about it together because it helps us in our Christian walk. So make sure you go like and subscribe to the Bible Project. They do really great work. And if you like my commentary today, make sure that you like and subscribe to this channel as well. It's literally the best way that you can help a young channel like mine. But I'm Reverend Matt, and I'm the Connectionalist, and I'll see you again. Bye-bye.